So today I'm going to be taking a look at this Grand Seiko. It's definitely probably like the 4th or 5th Grand Seiko I've reviewed. I love the brand, and this is kind of a unique one. This is only retailed by Watches of Switzerland, and it is a pretty cool watch. Probably my favorite Grand Seiko personally, so let's take a closer look. So we have a diameter of 40 millimeters, lug to lug of 46.6, height of 13, and a lug width of 21 millimeters. We're gonna have the in-house 9S85 high beat caliber beating away in here. Very classic, what Grand Seiko considers Tokyo striping, nothing crazy in terms of finishing. It does have a sapphire case back, sapphire crystal on the front, which is both very gently domed as well as boxed, which is just a nice look. You do have 100 meters of water resistance with a screw down crown, which is always nice to see. And the watch movement, I didn't mention it, but it has 55 hours of power reserve. Again, this is a high beat movement, so it's ticking 10 times a second. The accuracy is relatively +5, -3 seconds a day. That's their accuracy standard. And last but not least, the watch retails. Technically, you can't buy this from Grand Seiko. You have to go buy this from Watches of Switzerland because it's a collab with them. But this is $6,900 from Watches of Switzerland. Starting off with a dial here, and I think this is just a beautiful, beautifully done dial. We'll get a slightly better look when we zoom in for the macro portion, but it has this beautiful guilloche type texture to it. It of course is just a stamping process made by Grand Seiko, but I do really like how it's executed here. It's subtle enough of a pattern to kind of not be super in your face in most angles. It also has a little bit of a pure gray anthracite tone to it. It has those taupe-ish tones in it that you don't normally see in a pure gray watch. Like for example, what I'm wearing, super gray, super silver in terms of tone. This watch, it has a little bit more depth in terms of that color to it, which is really nice. We of course just have the classic Grand Seiko style layout here. Rectangular markers for all the markers except 12, where we have the double marker itself. Of course, the sword style handset, beautifully faceted. We have the very light blue painted handset, as well as a little bit of a blue accent on every hour marker to match that blue. It's a fun little hint of color. Supposedly it's supposed to be inspired by some moonlit water scenery over a beach. I'm maybe not overly seeing that story in this watch, but it is, I think, just a beautiful color combination. Although it's not quite a matching date wheel, we do have a black date wheel, which I think is a nice touch here. And something I just want to note for this watch is it plays with the light beautifully. Probably one of the most beautiful light plays I have of any watch. And the reason behind that is really how they finish the markers, and I think we have to zoom in to appreciate how that's done. But just to keep in mind, see how it just transitions from dark to light and light to dark, and it just has this beautiful, again, it just plays with the light and the light dances on those markers. So let's zoom in and see what's going on. This is what I was talking about. The markers have these beautiful pyramidal type shape to them, and at the very top you have that what I'll just call a ribbing texture engraved into the top of the marker. And you can see at some angles it goes completely black and looks like it's almost polished. At other angles it has this beautiful light play where it kind of diffuses the light and almost gives a rainbow type of effect at certain angles depending on the light you have around you. And it leads to this just beautiful living dynamic type of marker where you have so many facets here. You have the sides, you have the very front, again, the middle between these two markers, the ribbing. There's so much interest going on with just this tiny little marker. And because they're relatively tall and because of how they're shaped, again, they just capture the light beautifully. And a benefit of this marker type is it's fairly legible most of the time in most of the lightings because all those little ridges grab the light pretty easily, and it's very rare that is completely dark, and it's very rare the whole watch is completely dark. So this watch is extremely legible even though it's such a dark dial. And you can see they do the same type of finishing, at least in theory, for the handset. They don't use a striping or ribbing on the actual handset, they just do a brushing against a polish on the edges. So, but it has that same effect of that brushed surface catches the light more often. It doesn't really go as black as the rest of the polished surfaces do, so it stays more legible more often. Looking at the handset, you can see it is beautifully finished. We have a center pinion cap. There's like a little tiny speck of dust there on the center pinion cap, which, you know, I would have loved to not see there, but it is what it is. You can also just see the watch itself, or the seconds hand itself, is painted beautifully blue. There really isn't any splotchiness or inconsistency with the painting of that hand itself. Minute hand, it's pretty much perfect. Of course, these Grand Seiko hands, you have the super sharp point. It's just so well polished. And this is where Grand Seiko shines, you know, the finishing at the price point, this attention to detail at the price point. And again, because most brands at this price point aren't doing this kind of marker configuration, these very large metal multifaceted markers, Grand Seiko tends to have more light play on the dials than really any other brand. Now focusing on the actual pattern itself, it's this beautiful triangular pattern. There's areas of dark, there's areas of light, they shift as you move it. There's actual three-dimensionality and depth to the pattern. It almost feels like there might be a lacquer or kind of just glossy layer on the very top, because the dial can go and get pretty glassy at some angles, but most of the time you're seeing the pattern really well, very alive texture. I think especially since you have these darker and lighter tones that battle against each other, you get more than one tone in the watch. This is where these like subtle taupe-ish tones come out and really shine. You can see at the very middle, it's very small. It's almost just tiny little points with no really defined shape. And then towards the end, they grow and grow and grow and grow and become these beautiful defined triangles. And it just is a really fun looking pattern. The text is done well. We just have automatic high beat here at the 6 o'clock. We have Grand Seiko and of course the Grand Seiko logo brushed there at the 12. Nothing too crazy to write home about. It's done well. The white contrasts well against the dial. You have these white painted elements in the seconds track off the dial here, so it kind of ties in there. It is just a beautifully executed dial. Very clean. I like that they kept the seconds track off the dial to not really clutter this beautiful little design. And really, there's not really much bad I can say about it. Sure, there was that little tiny QC issue on the pinion there, but as far as watches goes, this is still beautifully, beautifully finished. Taking a look in natural light, we can see this is where a lot of those brown or more taupe tones start to come out of the dial. It's not just flat gray, which is fantastic, because in the shade you get those pure gray tones, and here there's more this golden, unique flair about the watch. So in direct light, it looks fantastic. The finishing looks great. The dial looks fantastic. When you go into the shade, again, the more golden tones disappear. And I think it's cool that it has this cooler and warmer nature about the watch depending on the lighting situation. It's very anthracite here. It's very shades of gray. It's very cool. And overall, I think it looks fantastic in both lighting situations. Of course, in this more shaded light, you get those markers that pop out a lot more by comparison, and it looks fantastic. So moving on to the case here, and this is actually one of my favorite cases from Grand Seiko. It is what's called the 62GS. It's from like, I believe 1967 or the late 60s, and it has this unique design of being built without a bezel. So if I bring my watch in here, of course most watches have this metal ring along the outside. It's usually a separate part of the watch that is part of the piece construction of the case, where if we look at the Grand Seiko here, it has none of that. It's just a floating crystal. It really is like two lugs with a circular case plopped into it, or circular dial plopped into it to hold it together. You have this, which is almost like a pseudo bezel, but it's more connecting the case, and it's much lower than a bezel typically would be. So yeah, it's still a very much bezel-less case. It makes the crystal, of course, raise a little higher, but it also, in my opinion, makes the watch feel visually thinner, because the only metal you're really interacting with is that pretty thin visual mid case. The case back, although a little on the thicker side, pretty much just sits into the wrist. It's a very like Rolex style construction of a thicker case back that hides the thickness of a watch, and the thin mid case, which makes it feel thin. So I think it's a very beautiful construction here, and is very ergonomic as well. Focusing on the finishing, we of course have all these beautiful facets. Even just the bottom of the lug has a facet, 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 3 little facets just in this tiny little end down portion. You have this beautiful angle. I mean, it's not really anglage, it just is a side of the case that is mirrored on both sides, fully high polished. You have another cut down high polished facet, and then you have the fully brushed mid case, horizontal brushing, very finely done, looks fantastic. Drilled lug holes, which I always like to see, makes strap changing really easy. And then a mirrored bottom facet here, like on the top, which helps just visually thin out the case. And again, it's just one of those higher end finishing things to show you that they're paying attention to details. Of course, have a Grand Seiko signed crown. So unscrewing the crown, super easy, very smooth action. Actually setting the time, super smooth as well. No really grinding or unwanted sounds in the operation. The date, pretty much the same. Pretty good operation, pretty definitive click once you're changing over the date. Hopefully you could hear that. And really, that's about it. Screwing it in, also pretty easy. It's not like a decoupling crown, so once you're screwing it in, you're still winding the watch, but this is automatic with kind of a, you don't have any fear of overwinding it, so that's not an issue. Taking a look at the case back, again, pretty simple finishing overall. Nothing to really write home about, just pretty nice striping. It's nothing crazy, of course, gold in the logo there, a little gold, and really a paragraph of information right there about saying it's, you know, adjusted through temperature in 6 positions. And really, that's about it. You do have, of course, sapphire case back, some text on the outside like serial and whatnot. And then it's hard to capture, but you can kind of see right there, you have a ghosted Grand Seiko lion logo. And I'll try to insert a photo that captures it better. But it's nice because at certain angles you see it, at most angles you don't. It's just kind of like my light's not conducive to seeing it right now. But it's a really nice way of adding that logo that doesn't cover the movement. And then before we move on, taking a quick look at the bracelet, really nothing to write home about here. Male end links, so it kind of extends it a little out further than the actual true lug to lug. It's not terrible though. You can see it's only a couple millimeters on each side. So instead of the 46, it's 49.7. Not that big of an issue. You do have, of course, the polished interlink there. You have mainly brushing. It's a very nice brushing. It grabs the light nicely. You have a little bit of polish on the sides of the link and a tiny, tiny little chamfer if the light wants to catch it. There you go. So a tiny chamfer on the edge. You have a fold over push button deployment, GS logo and the clasps there. Nothing crazy to write home about again, but it's serviceable. And of course, screw links. So moving on to how this watch wears, earlier I was wearing this, my Alexander Shorokov. And there we have the watch sitting on my 6.5-inch wrist, and proportionally I think it fits pretty well. Not too long lug to lug, sits pretty well within the bounds of my wrist. You zoom out a little by comparison, you can see, I think it just wears proportionally very nice. It doesn't look oversized, it doesn't look small either. This is one of those ones where you can wear on a pretty small wrist, because like here I have closer to a 6-inch wrist, and it's starting to kind of fill out my entire wrist, but it's still not too big necessarily. It doesn't sit really that tall overall when you're considering the crystal's domed, the case back sitting inside of the wrist. So the mid case itself is relatively thin in the way it wears. Here we have like a more true down the barrel shot, and again, sits pretty close to the wrist, especially when you flex your wrist, it sits really inside of it, quote unquote. So I don't really have any issues wearing this watch. It fits under 90% of my cuffs. Some of my tighter cuffs, it will be like a little bit of a hassle to get under, but hey, that's kind of what happens when you have tighter cuffs. So not a pure dress watch, and that's not what Grand Seiko sees it as, but it can work that way in a pinch. Now moving on to some other straps, here we have this beautiful, I believe they call it anthracite, from Fluco, which is the same company that makes the strap for Nomos. This is pretty perfectly color matched to the dial, kind of a grayish with those tiny brown tones inside of it. If you had more of a true light gray, it's not quite perfect with this dial. You can definitely get away with it, but I think this darker gray kind of works really well. Zoom in a little closer to kind of just appreciate that. Again, these tones are pretty perfect overall. Let me bring the other tones of gray back in. So we have these guys and this guy. So like again, this gray, again, if you really want it to work, it can. This gray, not quite perfect, but I mean, this strap made for this watch. Really nice. It's a 21 to 18 millimeter, so it's a fairly decent taper. It's not too dramatic though. And I think it just looks fantastic on this watch. You can get a little bit more of a further away view. I think the dark on dark tones really makes it still classy, still can be dressed up this way. The strap's thick enough to where it doesn't feel too dressy necessarily. Of course, this type of grain of leather is a casual type of leather, so I think it looks pretty good. Now, forgive me for my sins, but this strap is clearly slightly undersized. It's a 20 millimeter strap on a 21 millimeter watch, but I don't have a white silicone, even though I thought it would look pretty good on this watch. And I honestly do think it does, and I should probably order one. It almost looks like it's meant for the watch. And again, I love these white straps just because one, they're comfortable, two, they add a brightness to it, and really three, especially when you get watches like this that really have these metal markers that pop, you get this white tone from the markers a lot of the time, and it just matches with the strap. It looks like it's meant to be. So, you know, it's a fun way to mix it up, and I dig it. Pros and cons of this watch here. I wonder how good the autofocus will do on it. This, I love it personally. This is probably my favorite Grand Seiko that I've personally owned, and it started off as maybe I'll like it, and I'm surprised by how much I did. And that's just kind of a testament to the fact that sometimes you have to see these things in person, you have to try them in person, and unfortunately sometimes you just have to own it to find out if it's really for you. So for me, one of the biggest pros about this watch is obviously going to be the finishing. It's what keeps me coming back to Grand Seiko. It's what makes me love this watch in particular. Because you have this super dark dial, you have the super bright indices that contrast against that, and they really genuinely just pop off the dial. It's almost like the markers are glowing half the time. Like, I don't know how well that will pick up, but maybe this way. It just, the way they shine is, it's not like any other watch I own, and is part of it just because Grand Seiko tends to use larger metal markers than other brands? Sure, but that is the aesthetic, and because it's finished so well, it does have this beautiful shine to it. My other thing that I ended up surprisingly liking about this watch is the color depth that you get from it, especially from the outside shots that you saw. It's not just a static gray. It is truly more anthracite. It has these brown, these taupe-ish tones inside of it. And I'm glad that it's not just one color. It's not just a classic lacquered gray black dial. It has, you know, depth to it. It has interest. It's something that, especially depending on the strap you use or depending on maybe what shirt you're wearing for the day, it will bring out tones that you didn't see before. And last but not least, the thing that I genuinely like about this watch is the ergonomics of it. Is it thicker on paper? Yes, it's about 13 millimeters, but to me, it doesn't feel like that on wrist. It wears pretty comfortably, it wears pretty close to the wrist. Again, you have a domed crystal, you have that case back that sinks into the wrist. So the ergonomics of this case, the fact that it's built without the bezel, the overall shape and stance of it on wrist, I do genuinely really like. And it's a case shape that is, I mean, it's more than just a regular like circle with lugs like this. It's something a little bit more unique. Now moving on to cons, and no watch is perfect, but one of the cons I definitely do have about this watch is I do think the texture is a little too subtle at times. It's beautiful when it comes out, and it's this very subtle but interesting texture, especially in sunlight. But even right now when I'm looking at it, it's kind of lit but not lit. It's a little shaded right now, and it just looks like a gray dial, which is cool because sometimes it's textured, sometimes it's untextured, but it's unfortunate you can't see the texture 24/7, and even when you can see the texture, sometimes half of it disappears. So it's cool that it's executed here, but I think I would have liked a little bit more of a defined pattern personally. Another con for me is I personally think the bracelet's a little bit boring, and I don't think it's perfectly matched to the design of the case shape. The bracelet by comparison is a little bit more sporty, it's a little bit more, I wouldn't say industrial, but definitely just sporty, whereas the watch has an elegance to it, especially with the shape of the lugs, the thinness of the lugs. It doesn't feel completely congruous with the bracelet design. Does that mean it's a bad thing? No, it's just kind of a exists kind of thing. It works, it serves its purpose, but I actually think half the time it looks better on a strap, and I'd be curious if there was a more delicate, not quite beads of rice, but a more intricate grained, multi-link type of bracelet design, if this would look better on that. And sure, it would probably be dressier leaning because of that, but Grand Seiko by nature, I think the whole brand leans dressy because of those sharp markers, because of them only using metal indices. I mean, even their sports watches look fairly dressy half the time. And my last con, it's not a major issue, but it's just the fact that it has 21 millimeter lugs. Other brands do it, sure, but it's a less common lug size. I have a bunch of 20 millimeter straps, so it's a little bit annoying when I have all these combos that I want to do, but then I have to go out and buy new straps to make that happen. A little bit of a hindrance. So do I think it would have looked weird with 20 millimeter lugs? Probably not. And even then, if it did, at least from the brand's design point, make it 39 with 20 millimeter lugs potentially. Just shrink down the proportions to where you can have a more standard lug size, I think. So final thoughts, and like I said, this watch pleasantly surprised me. I didn't expect to like it as much as I did, and this is probably going to be the Grand Seiko that stays in my collection. Whether or not that ends up being true, we'll find out. But I genuinely love this watch. I love the monotone nature of it. It tends to match most things because it's just gray. It just is a grab and go, fits most things. What keeps me drawn to this watch and what keeps me going back to wanting to wear this watch is not only that versatility, but the way that it shines. Again, that finishing does just stand out. It just does look different from other watches. It's kind of like a torch in a sense. It glows, it sparkles, it draws your eye in, and it just is at the end of the day pretty to look at. I'm a dress watch guy by nature, so this being a dressier design that leans sporty or leans more towards an everyday piece is my kind of everyday watch. At the end of the day, I think this is a really good watch. If you didn't know about it, now you do. And let me know what you think. Let me know down below what's wrong about it, what else you thought could be improved. I don't have many cons, so it'd be interesting to hear what you guys don't like about it. I might be biased because I really enjoy the watch. But yeah, let me know down below. Thank you as always for watching the video. Hope you got something out of it, and I will see you in another one.